transforming the regulatory system for higher education. And this transformation is very much needed, which has been very clearly articulated in NEP document, National Education Policy 2020 document, transforming the regulatory system in order to improve the inclusion equity and to provide quality education to all in the country. So what is regulatory system and how does it work is in the need of complete overhaul. It regulates the quality, the monitoring, academic progression, research, and so on. The outcome, whether access equity and inclusion are maintained or not. So the system needs complete overhaul in order to re-energize the higher education sector. The distinct functions of regulation, accreditation, funding and academic standard setting will be performed by district, independent and empowered bodies. There has to be decentralization to create checks and balances in the system and minimize the conflicts of interest and eliminate concentration of power. The regulatory system needs overhauling, re-energizing, restructuring. So there are 3 to 4 important regulatory systems which are proposed. One is NHERC, which is National Higher Education Regulatory Council. What does it do? What will it do? It will function as the common single point regulator for higher education sector, named as Higher Education Regulatory Council, NHERC. By eliminating the duplication and disjunction of regulatory efforts by multiple regulatory agencies, it will require a relook and repealing of existing acts, a restructuring of various existing regulatory bodies to enable this single point regulation. It will be set up to regulate in a light but tight and facilitative manner. Any grievances from stakeholders arising out of information placed in public domain will be adjudicated by NHERs. Feedback from randomly selected students at each institute will be solicited online to ensure valuable input in regular intervals. The redressal mechanism, feedback redressal mechanism has to be there. So online feedback will be obtained and the remedial measures will be taken. The another regulatory body agency proposed is NAC, National Accreditation Council. It's not NAAC, which is called as a NAC body currently. This is National Accreditation Council. Accreditation of institutes will be primarily based on norms, public self-disclosure, good governance, and the outcomes, and to be carried out by an independent ecosystem of accrediting institutions supervised and overseen by NAC. The institutes will aim through their institutional development plans to attain highest level of accreditation over the next 15 years. Eventually, the NAC will aim function as a self-governing degree granting institutions or the clusters. The third one is HEGC, which is Higher Education Grants Council. It will carry out funding and financing of higher education based on transparent criteria, including institute development plans prepared by the institutions and the progress made on their implementation. The HEGC will be entrusted with the disbursement of scholarship and development funds for launching new emerging areas and focus areas. The third regulatory body is GEC, the General Education Council. It will frame expected learning outcomes for higher education programs, also referred as graduate attributes. Graduate attributes are the important attributes which will be reflected in the students when the student demonstrate those expected learning outcomes. So the National Higher Education Qualification Framework, called as NHEQF, will be formulated by GEC, that is General Education Council, will work in sync with National Skill Qualification Framework to ease the integration of vocational education into higher education. Higher education qualifications leading to degree and other certificates shall be described by NHEQF in terms of learning outcomes. So the important role is to suggest the expected learning outcomes, is to frame and formulate expected learning outcomes for different programs. So we'll set up facilitative norms, credit transfer, equivalence through or with the help of NHEQF. GEC will be mandated to identify specific skills that students must acquire during their academic programs. And this is why we are saying the set of learning outcomes has to be demonstrated by the student so that we can prepare them as a well-rounded learners with the requirement of 21st century. Another regulatory body is PSSB. Professional councils such as ICAR, NCT, and CVT will act as all these councils, professional councils like Indian Council of Academic Research, Agriculture Research, the National Council of Teacher Education, will act as a professional standard setting bodies. PSSB will be invited to be members of GEC. So these councils will be invited as the members of GEC. And the bodies will continue to draw the curricula, lay down academic standards, coordinate between teaching, research, and extension of their discipline as a members of GEC. They would help in specifying the curriculum framework within which HEs may prepare their own curricula, eliminating conflicts of interest between different roles, and will also aim to empower HEIs. So they will work in sync with GEC to empower the higher education institutes. There has to be transparency when we talk about the regulatory agencies. The functioning of all verticals, the 4 verticals we have discussed, will be based on transparent public disclosure and use of technology extensively to reduce human interface to ensure efficiency as well as transparency. So strict compliance measures will, with a strict action, including penalties for false disclosure of information, will be ensured so that transparency is maintained. HCI persons having their own role and expertise in the relevant areas along with integrity, commitment, and demonstrated track record of public service. And another thing which is very important, talking about regulatory, to curb commercialization. Multiple mechanisms with checks and balances will combat and stop commercialization of higher education. This will be a key priority of regulatory system. All education institutions will be held to similar standards of audit and disclosure and not for profit entity. Surpluses, if there are any, will be reinvested in the education sector so that quality can be enhanced and academic quality research can also be improved. There will be transparent public disclosure of these financial matters with recourse of grievance handling mechanisms to the general public. And lastly, which is a very important factor for any higher education institute, is a fees, and that fixation will be through certain mechanisms, transparent mechanisms for the fixing of fees with upper limit for different types of institutes, depending on their accreditation, will be developed. So that when the degree of accreditation, the grade of accreditation is different, the fee structure will be different. This will empower private institutes to set fees for their programs independently through within the laid out norms and broad applicable regulatory mechanism. All fees and charges by institutes will be transparently and fully disclosed. There will be no arbitrary increases in these charges during the period of enrollment of that student. So therefore, regulatory plays a very important role in ensuring the inclusion, equity, accessibility, and quality education for all. Thank you.